that as well. I'm looking not at this one because I have you all on my big screen. So I'm looking at you if I'm not looking directly at you, just so that you know. I see Randy there with his face shield. Nice, being safe. So at the bottom of your screen, you'll see a mute and a video button on the bottom left. You can mute or unmute yourself when you're speaking. Also, there's a video button if you'd like to share your video. And I mean, it's always nice seeing everyone's faces on here. And then at the bottom, you can also see a chat function. So you can click on it to type in any questions that you have. We want this to be a fairly informal session, so please chime in with any questions that you have, either by unmuting yourself and asking questions or typing in the chat bar. We will be recording this session for anyone that is unable to make it today. So just so that you know, this will be recorded, but only distributed to the stewards, not to the general public. So I think we're probably good to go. I'm going to go ahead and hit that record button. Oh, no, I think, wait, Gabby, is it already hit? Yeah, it's already recording.
I think it's been recording the whole time. So
we can probably, you're already on it. Perfect.
We can probably trim the video later to take out our little 15-minute intro.
Perfect. So yeah, Gabby, I'll let you take it away.
Yeah, sounds good. So hi, everybody. And again, welcome to our steward orientation meeting. There are parts of this meeting that will be a little dry, but again, we want it to be a very open communication between us all. So if at any point you do have questions, feel free to unmute yourself and ask those questions. We just basically through this meeting want to make sure that everybody understands what their roles and responsibilities are. And we want you to know that, again, like throughout all of this, we just want you to do what you're comfortable with and what you feel safe doing. So never feel like you have to go above and beyond what your threshold is. But again, we can talk about that a little bit more in detail today. But again, thank you all for coming, and we really appreciate you taking the time to spend 2.5 hours-ish with us over Zoom instead of being outside and enjoying this beautiful weather. Right, so I'm just going to start us off with a land acknowledgement. So obviously I can't acknowledge the land that everybody else is on, but I am going to acknowledge the land that I am on today. So since we were unable to gather in person, I would like to acknowledge the land that I'm situated on at home here today in Hamilton. This place is the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and Mississauga, and is the current territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit Peoples under the Between the Lakes Treaty No. 3, signed in 1792. Since the very beginning, Indigenous peoples have inhabited these lands, which are still home to diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. We are grateful for the opportunity to gather on this territory, even though current circumstances only let us do so virtually, and to work and live in this community. We commit ourselves to the work of reconciliation with Indigenous peoples. Through this land acknowledgement, our intent is to honor and show gratitude to those taking care of these lands, and as a sign of respect and willingness to learn and heal. When hiking the various nature trails throughout Hamilton, I'm reminded that my ancestors broke covenants to live on this land, and we need to work to mend those relationships that were severed and the peoples that were and still today are affected. Our hope is that we can come together to care for this land and each other for many generations to come. So I'm also just going to go over our agenda for today. So we did start with the land acknowledgement. Next, we're going to do a bit of a round robin. So if you could give us your name, the property that you steward, and maybe a fun memory from the reserve if you have stewarded it in the past, or what you're looking forward to working on this year if you're a new steward. Then we're going to go over a quick overview of the Nature Reserve Program and of Ontario Nature in general, even though a lot of you probably know more about Ontario Nature than I do. But for those of you that don't, we'll give you a little bit of an intro to it. Then we're going to talk about the stewardship agreement. So I'm going to pull it up and we'll go through a couple of things. Then we're going to go through some health and safety. After that, I'm going to pull up the Google Drive. I'm going to open all of the folders with you, and we're going to go through a couple of easy things like uploading photos or things like adding species to the species list. And then even though we are going to be asking questions throughout, if you have questions that maybe don't relate to this stuff, or you think of questions afterwards, we'll have a question period at the end where we can bring any of those things up and hopefully tie up any loose ends. And does anybody have any questions about any of that before we get started?
Who's this?
Gabriella.
Oh, this is Gabby, sorry. All right.
So I guess we can start with, interactions with Gabby and I first.
Yeah, I can definitely start with myself. So my name is Gabby Zagorski, and I am the Nature Reserves Coordinator at Ontario Nature. So Samara and I work really closely on the Nature Reserve Department to help coordinate any activities that go on at the 26 nature reserves that Ontario Nature owns. We work really closely with you guys to make sure that all of the activities that we want to get done in the year are happening, and sort of any other things that have to get done in order to make those things happen, like applying for permits and interacting with different partners and those kinds of things. Samara, if you want to go next.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. I think I've met everyone in this call, either in person or virtually. I'm Samara Sukumar. I'm the Nature Reserves Manager, and I work really closely with Gabby, doing all the things that she mentioned. So we do have 26 nature reserves that we manage, as well as 3 conservation easements across Southern Ontario. And like she said, we work really closely with all our lovely stewards, all of you, and various partners. And we also do research on some of our properties and various types of management. If the property allows, we also, based on the management planning, we also develop trails sometimes and manage those and that sort of thing. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to this meeting. So I guess, Gabby, do you want to just call on people individually? That might be the easiest way.
Yeah, maybe I'll just look at all of the like little video bubbles that I see, and we'll go from there. So Bill Moses, if you wanted to go first. Oh, you're on mute, sorry. There we go.
Bonjour, Ani. Bill Moses Nadishnikas. That's my land acknowledgement for the Anishinaabe people that live in this area. I'm not a native person myself, I'll let you know. I'm a member of the Owen Sound Field Naturalists, and I am not a main contact, but I have had quite a long many years of stewarding land for various organizations, NCC, EBC, and ABC, and the whole alphabet, I think. And I'm very interested in invasives. I have a lot of GPS abilities. I'm going to be 80 years old in a few weeks, and I'm almost, well, not desperate, that's not the right word, but would be very happy and pleased to pass any skills that I've gained along to any people in the local area that are interested. Thank you.
That's awesome, Bill. Thank you so much. All right, Dave Emtage, if you want to go next.
Morning, Dave Emtage here. I'm new as a steward, but not to the stewardship program. My brother had stepped down, and I'm his replacement to follow along. My background, looking at the project of Lyle Island, I guess, is the property. Family has had a family cottage up there for 50 years, and since that time, I've been, it was probably the nature itself that led me through schooling that gave me interest in learning a little more about all that stuff that makes our planet our planet. And I'm here just because I think it's important for the pressures on that particular piece of land with the influx of people that we, I guess through the group, I get some skills to try to help the community to keep it what it is, as opposed to thinking of it as just a natural resource to be consumed. That's the reason I'm part of the group today.
Well, we're so happy to have you. And Renzo, if you wanted to go next.
Yeah, hi. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
All right. Renzo Della Via. Live in Brampton, Ontario. I'm dealing with the Willoughby Nature Reserve, which is a relatively small reserve under Ontario Nature. I've been involved about 4 years. I still think I'm relatively new to it because there's been a lot of change even at Ontario Nature. And we're trying to get a better sense of the obligations and what we do next. Fortunately, the reserve is not far from Toronto. It's in the town of Caledon. It's under the Credit Valley Conservation Authority's geographic interest. So we have and have for a long time some involvement with the CVC experts that go through that reserve and do analysis. So what I'd like to do is hopefully learn a little more, ensure that the reserve is maintained safe. Because of this particular pandemic, it's been found by a lot of individuals. People who never knew it existed now do, and it's becoming a busier reserve. The paths, there's a couple of them that are used, but at a time when you wouldn't see a soul, now you see 6, 7, 8 cars parked on the road. So I'd like to hopefully work with Ontario Nature to make sure that it's maintained in a 1, pristine, and 2, safe manner and moving forward. And obviously participate in Ontario Nature's plans, which I have 74 pages to review. So that's about it. And I'm Italian, and I immigrated when I was 2. So I'm a new Canadian in a sense. Love the history of Canada and its natural environment. By the way, I was a member of Ontario Nature before I became a member of the reserve stewardship. That's it. So back to you.
Thanks, Renzo. All right, Jim and Christine, if you wanted to go next.
Second, I'll unmute myself. Okay. Yes, Jim and Christine, we're from the Huron Fringe Field Naturalists, and we steward the George Newton Reserve. That's a small reserve, southwestern part of Ontario, just a bit east of Goderich. Biggest issue I think we have at our reserve is invasive species. Garlic mustard has just gone crazy, and we started 2 years ago to attack a particular patch to see if we can make any inroads to getting it under control. So this will be our 3rd spring at it. And I think even last year we did notice some improvement compared to the previous year, but I know this is like a 10-year effort just for this one patch. So anyway, we'll continue to attack that patch. And then I think this year we're going to attack a new patch, and especially overgrown patch that we have no hope of pulling, but perhaps we can, we were thinking of maybe just using an electric trimmer to, when the thing gets mature but not flowered, to hit it with that and to see if that over a couple of years can sort of make a dent in the garlic mustard. Anyway, that invasive species, it's easy for us to recognize. So it's something that we feel that we can tackle.
Thanks to both of you. All right, Don Hall, if you want to go next.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, good. I am Don Hall, and I suppose I'm also representing Dave Eiler, who's not able to be with us today. We're with the Sioux Naturalists, and we are taking care of 2 reserves near Sault Ste. Marie on St. Joseph Island, if you know where that is, the Walwork Reserve and the Hay Marsh Reserve. Both are in the order of 100 acres, and both are remote, a long ways from most disturbances. They're accessible by road, but only marginally so. So developments, nature trails, education endeavors really are not practical or wise in this case. I think our main goal is to keep them in a natural state. Both are disturbed from logging and farming in the past, but both are returning to a pretty natural state, and we want to continue doing that. That's about all I would have to say about our Haymarsh and Walwork reserves.
Thanks so much, John. I wish we could come see you more often, but
I wish you could too.
Hopefully in the coming years.
Right.
Thanks, John. All right,
Okay.
Rick Barry, if you wanted to go next.
Yes, thank you. Am I coming through there okay?
Yes, you are.
Good, thank you. So I'm Rick Barry. I am the stewardship coordinator for the York Simcoe Nature Club. And we are stewards, our club is, of the Cothram-Ulach Nature Reserve, which is right beside Newmarket, which also means we're a very well-used nature reserve. And as was previously mentioned, with this pandemic, we've become even more used. And as Gabby and Smara know, it's a big concern for us right now. So a fun memory. Well, I guess I would have to say about 1.5 years ago, we had some beavers that moved onto the property, and they've been very industrious, and they have now created an enormous beaver pond, and the dam is located right beside a bridge that people walk over. So it's become a real attraction for us, and I think it's really added to the property. I think that's it. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Rick. All right, Barbara Bogle.
Okay. It's actually David Young that is the steward here, using Barbara's computer. But also with me today is Randy, who has been a coordinator, steward coordinator for the Altberg for a number of years. I'm new to the role, so I will give most of my time to Randy. I did coordinate an Adopt a Road program along the Road 45 between Kinmount and Norland, where we're located. But Randy is the one who's done a lot of the work, so I will spend 1 year or 2 learning more and leave it to Randy to introduce himself.
Speaking of that, Randy, did you want to go next?
I hope I can. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. So, yeah, I've been doing work at the Altberg for a while. And since I'm the only one in the room, I'm going to take my mask off. Big deal. I've got glasses. I was in about a week ago and remarked trails to coincide with the new maps that are coming out, hopefully this spring. So we used to have a green, a yellow, and a red trail. Now we have a green, a yellow, and a red trail, but the red trail is nowhere near where it used to be. It's in a different location. So that has been marked, and I'm getting ready to go in and obliterate the old red trail because it doesn't exist anymore. Exciting stuff in the Altberg. I haven't seen the birds back yet that I expect. The snow is just about out, and I'm watching a couple of butterflies out the window, but I can get in there with the leaf blower and get that done soon too. So that's it.
Thanks, Randy.
You're welcome.
All right. Simon?
Hi, Simon and Sharon here.
Hi.
Lovely to be here and see you all. We steward the Petrel Point Nature Reserve up in Red Bay, and our property abuts the reserve, so we get to see the comings and goings, and it's become quite popular, as all the reserves have become. We have lovely trails that run through the reserve. We also have problems with invasive species, trail maintenance. We do a lot of that, and actually it's just a joy to work with Ontario Nature, and it's we look forward to continuing doing it in the future.
Thank you so much, both of you. Hopefully we'll be able to see you this year. I don't know with the pandemic, but it would be nice.
I know, we missed you guys.
All right, Stuart, did you want to go next? Stuart Nutt?
Yeah, Stuart from Southampton, Ontario, along with my wife Nancy, and we steward the Sauble Dunes preserve and reserve, and it's actually just north of the Sauble River in Sauble Falls. Fairly remote, and we were in there just this past week, and seems to be in great shape at this point. A year ago, came across a family of woodcock, which I had not seen for quite a while, and so, but fairly unique area. So we're looking forward to what's going to happen with that area in the future. The end.
I think we lost you a little bit, Stuart, but I think I heard what you said.
Yeah, I heard everything. It might be you, Gabby. I'm not sure, but thanks, Stuart.
Oh, it might be my internet. Okay, I'm going to turn off my video just in case. Okay, sorry about that. Rod, if you wanted to go next.
Yeah, Rod Steinecker. My Anishinaabe is pretty brutal. So I'll just say that I live on the traditional homelands of the Saugeen and Ojibwe First Nations up there just outside of Tobermory. I've been looking in on the Baptist Harbor or Baptist Harbor Nature Reserve on and off for the last 20 years, looking to get a little more formal and scheduled with what I do there. The reserve's a wonderful alvar, a very important one on the shoreline of Lake Huron. It has some great flatland ancient white cedar trees, and there's a tree in the immediate area that's been cored at over 540 years old, and we have numerous 300 to 400 year olds. We do have trouble with invasive species, most of them being human. And again, it's the pandemic discovery idea. I've been involved with a number of naturalist organizations up in this area with Bruce Peninsula Bird Observatory, and more recently with the Turtle Trackers program through the Bruce Peninsula National Park. We have quite a few nesting turtles. I should actually be out there this morning. I have 9 overwintering painted turtle nests that they started right on cue yesterday, hatching. Warm weather followed by a rain, and the little ones have started to come out. We had at least one road mortality yesterday, so I'm feeling pretty anxious about getting out and removing little ones off the fairly busy road, and that's at Baptist marsh, which is about a kilometer from the nature reserve itself. So I know we've got important stuff to talk about, but I'll be rushing out to the marsh as soon as possible.
No worries, Rod. We appreciate all of the work that you do. Emily and Cameron, if you wanted to give an intro. I think we just have you on mute though.
Start now. Okay, start now.
I'm Cameron, and this is Emily. I'm really interested to see all the white hair out there. I feel quite at home now. We were yesterday. We've got a large 40-acre marsh on the property. The whole property, including some adjoining M&R land, is about 800 acres, and we were trying to repair we did repair an overflow pipe, but I swear, the beavers were out there laughing at us, thinking that thinking they were watching some sort of Punch and Judy show, and they'll have probably wrecked it by this morning. Anyway, I haven't been out yet to look. We also have a terrible problem with invasive species, and particularly garlic mustard, and Emily has been instrumental in trying to get it under control.
Yeah, I've been working on that for about 12 years now. And I have had some success with some patches. So I eliminated a couple of patches, but sometimes it seems as though for every one I eliminate, 2 more spring out somewhere else. Mm-hmm. So it's a never ending battle. But we've been working with the reserve since the first part of the reserve was something that Cameron and I worked on, actually bringing together. What about 1990? Yeah, something about that. And then it's been really exciting over the years to watch how the reserve has grown through further purchases. So it's now getting to be a pretty good size.
Thank you so much, both of you. All right, I think we have Nancy White next.
Hi, I'll repeat what Stu said. I'm new to the stewardship program, and the property once belonged to a very good friend of ours, and we're just looking forward to helping to maintain it and make it a place hopefully that people can carefully visit if they do so. Anyways, looking forward to it.
Thanks so much, Nancy. John Muff, if you wanted to go next.
Hello, my name's John Muff. I'm representing the Pembroke Area Field Naturalists, and we're stewarding the Riley Bird Nature Reserve, which is a small reserve halfway between Ottawa and Ottawa. It's a relative develop over the years, and see how visitors will appreciate the area. That's it. Thanks.
Thanks so much, John. Carrie, if you wanted to go next.
Hello, Volume Helps. I'm Carrie Kennedy. I'm in Niagara. With the Niagara Falls Nature Club, we steward the Harold Mitchell Nature Reserve, which is in Wainfleet. It is a reserve that doesn't have any trails or paths. It's a swamp forest filled with magnificent eastern hemlock. It's been a treat to get out there and muck around. I guess when you're asking about a funny moment or memory, I immediately thought of being out there last November in rubber boots that were just a little bit too big, and walking through the sloughs and getting so stuck. A student from Niagara College was trying to heave me out. I thought I was in quicksand and was a goner, but I managed to stay safe. Interesting thing with Harold Mitchell is that now it's been 2 years, the Canadian Food Inspection Agency found this little insect, the hemlock woolly adelgid, out there. So since that discovery, it's been an opportunity to connect further with Gabby and Ontario Nature and try to figure out management plan and steps forward with that. But yeah, we don't have people visitors, but we have these insect visitors that are new to, I mean, really, it's a very large it's very infested, and whereas other spots in Ontario could be eradicated, this one, yeah, is a different story. So I'll stop there. Thank you. Very nice to meet many of you.
Yeah, definitely to add on to what Carrie. I was going to say, just to add on to what Carrie said, if anybody is interested in looking up the hemlock woolly adelgid, it is a very pervasive pest and can have really negative effects on eastern hemlock. It is coming, and we definitely need to be aware of it. So I would definitely write that down and look up a little bit about it if you have a chance. But right now we're just struggling with it at Harold Mitchell, but who knows where it will end up popping up. It's a little scary, but we won't go into that today. All right, Pam, if you wanted to go next. I think you might be on mute there. Sorry, Pam.
There. Okay, I'm the president of Owen Sound Field Naturalists, and we have multiple properties that we deal with. I'm a little daunted with the task. We don't have a steward coordinator right at this moment, but we have a lot of people that are very involved with the program, and I'm basically just learning the roundabout with it. And I do know that a couple of Ontario Nature properties that Owen Sound Field Naturalists are the stewards for. So like I say, I'm just kind of getting in on the background. I have been out with Bill Moses, doing a couple of hikes with him and around some of the properties. So I'm quite anxious to get working on it and get things in place and kind of get a handle on everything that's happening with our club. Our club is very active, and we have a lot of properties around that that we deal with, our members are stewards of. So it's just trying to coordinate everything and get it together.
Thanks so much, Pam. We really appreciate what you and the club do.
Thanks.
All right. So I see Craig's iPad. I don't know if Craig's iPad wants to go next. I think you might be muted. Oh, there we go.
Yeah, can you? Okay. All right, I'm Craig Potter, and I represent Lambton Wildlife. I've only been at Lambton Wildlife for a couple of years, maybe into my 4th year now. And so I am new as of last week. I agreed to be the steward of the property at Sydenham Nature Reserve. Lambton Wildlife also coordinates with the Sydenham Nature Club to manage, along with Ontario Nature, that property. I'm looking forward to it. I've only visited the property once, and I was really amazed at the Virginia bluebells that we have there, and it's just incredible sycamores and all kinds of other incredible things there. That I'm from the Guelph area. We don't have sycamore there. So. It's my favorite tree now. I don't know, but anyway, we have. I'm really looking forward to it. Lambton Wildlife has 2 of their own properties with stewardship programs going for each of those, and we have a separate stewardship group to look after and help look after the Sydenham stuff. So really looking forward to it, and thanks for. I mean, it was kind of a last minute thing for me because I got the information Tuesday that I was on the stewards. And,
Thanks so much, Craig. Hopefully we can meet in person this year if things work out. If not, we may have to hold off till next year.
Okay.
All right. So Steve Yates, if you wanted to go next.
Hi, everybody. My name's Stephen Yates. I presume I can be heard. I have a couple of apologies. First of all, my camera for some reason isn't working. I had a lovely conversation with Gabby and Smira a couple of months ago, and they can tell you, because you cannot see my face, you're not missing anything. So the other apology I have actually is that I'll have to leave the meeting at about noon because I have another meeting. Anyway, I am brand new as a steward as well. About 8 months ago, I should tell you, I live in Kingston. 8 months ago, I bought a beautiful property, a 90-acre forest along the east shores of Lake Gananoque, which is about an hour's drive away from where I live. And as it turns out, that property is around the sides of a 200 and somewhat acre Ontario Nature Reserve property. And so it seemed natural, because I love forests, that it seemed natural that I would agree to be a steward for the Ontario Nature Reserve property as well. So basically, I'm now a kind of a steward for, I don't know, somewhere around 350 acres of forest along the edges of Lake Gananoque. The Ontario Nature Forest is accessed by a right-of-way through my forest, and so quite frankly, I'm honored to be asked to be a steward. I have no idea what I'm supposed to be doing, but I will learn. I'm a quick learner. Thank you, folks.
We're so happy to have you, Stephen. We're very excited to work with you. And just because I am sharing my screen, it's a little hard for me to navigate on this little video pane, but is there anybody who I haven't called upon yet who hasn't spoken? Okay. All right, well, that sounds good. So we'll sort of conclude the little round robin section that we did, and we can kind of move on to some of the nitty gritty. All right, so hopefully everybody can see the slides that I'm showing now, but I'm just gonna do a little bit of an intro to Ontario Nature. Again, for those of you that don't know too much. For those that do, I'm sorry that you're gonna have to listen to this rant again, but maybe you'll learn something new, who knows? So Ontario Nature was established in 1931. We're an environmental charity, and we are actually run mostly off of membership, donations, and then pots of funding that we apply for through various governmental and non-governmental organizations. So we aim to protect wild species and wild spaces through conservation, education, and engagement. We have a number of different programs at Ontario Nature, including a citizen science program. So some of you may be familiar with the Reptile and Amphibian Atlas, which went on for 10 years. It is now closed, and people can submit their observations through our iNaturalist project now. We also help with the Breeding Bird Atlas. We have a youth program whose goal is to educate and empower youth. We do a lot of advocacy work. So when the conservation authorities were losing their regulatory ability, we created an action alert, which allowed people to send a letter to their MPP. And we hosted a webinar about the implications of this. And we also have a boreal office in Thunder Bay, and that focuses on conservation work in Northern Ontario. For example, they try to advocate for species like the boreal caribou. And then more specifically, talking about our nature reserves program. In the nature reserves program, it's just Samara and I, and normally an intern if we get one. So again, we do apologize if it does take us a little bit longer sometimes to respond to your emails. But again, we do have 26 different properties and 3 easements that we try to coordinate the work that goes on there with. So yeah, again, we do apologize if it takes us a little bit longer, but it's not because we don't want to speak with you. We just have a few other things to do sometimes. But yeah, so with the help of our stewards, like all of you on the call today, we monitor each of the reserves in order to develop appropriate management plans and effectively manage every property that we have. And so our goal through this is to contribute to building our province-wide nature reserve system that will safeguard habitat for endangered plants and animals, protect biological diversity, set benchmarks for scientific research, and create opportunities for recreation and nature appreciation. We also host a variety of events on our nature reserves that some of you have probably been a part of, including things like bioblitzes, where for like a 24-hour period, we get experts, naturalists, and the public to come together to identify different species that they can see in certain areas. We do guided hikes, so sometimes we do orchid hikes, fern hikes, butterfly ID events, things like that on our properties. We host unveiling events when we have things like accessible trails put in or large signs or new signs put into our nature reserves. We do a number of planting events, invasive species removal events, and various reserves are monitored for different species like salamanders, snakes, and birds. We also conduct things like ecological land classification, which is just identifying the different vegetation species and the vegetation types found on the reserve, so then we can better manage them based on what's there. Oops. And so here I have a map of our nature reserves. So you can see they're just labeled by the number and which reserves. So we have reserves, as some of the stewards today have mentioned, as far north as St. Joseph's Island and as far south as Pelee Island. They all have different habitats on them, from alvars to bogs to old growth forests, and they're also different in so many ways based on the different species you can find and the types of rock they're situated on. And so on this slide, I just have a couple of photos from some of the nature reserves. So from left to right and then top to bottom, we have Stone Road Alvar, which is on Pelee Island, Gananoque Lake, which is near Kingston, Malcolm Bluff Shores, which is kind of like South Bruce Peninsula, and Bruce Alvar, which is more like North Bruce Peninsula. Okay. So does anybody have any questions after those slides? I know we haven't gotten into the nitty-gritty yet, but all right. Okay, so we can talk a little bit about the stewardship agreement now. So I'm just kind of going to go over it a little bit with everyone. We're going to talk about insurance coverage and a couple other topics. I'm going to see if I can just pull it up on the screen I'm sharing. Can everybody see this right now?
Nope. I think you're gonna have to stop sharing and then reshare
Okay.
your screen.
Okay, I can do that. All right, give me a second here, guys. Sorry about that. Okay, can everybody see this PDF of a stewardship agreement?
Yes, I can see it.
Yep.
Okay, great. All right, so I am going to use Altberg as an example. I won't be showing the bottom where we have, you know, people's addresses or email addresses or things like that. But all of the stewardship agreements look very similar. We did a total revamp of our stewardship agreements over this past year. It takes a lot of time because we have to go over them with our lawyer. We have to get them approved by Caroline, our executive director. We go through multiple rounds of edits, and it's basically just so we can make sure that we're protecting all of you and we're also protecting ourselves, and we're making sure that, you know, everything we have is in here and that we're trying to encompass everything that we do ask you to do. But I don't want anybody to be overwhelmed by this. Again, we have a lot of information that's written in this stewardship agreement, but at the end of the day, it's all about your safety and your comfort level. So one thing we do ask is that if you are signing on as a group, that say like your president or the representative of, you know, the stewardship for your club is signing that, then your club is covered by our insurance. But if you are an individual, we ask that you yourself sign that so that you can be covered by our insurance. And so they all kind of, again, like I said, look very similar. They have a little bit of an intro paragraph. We have a background about Ontario Nature itself, and then about the reserve you're stewarding. We feature the map that I just showed you. And then we also have sections on the roles of Ontario Nature, which I can kind of briefly go over here. So for our roles, we have to develop and maintain a management plan for the reserve, ideally once every 5 years. Unfortunately, this doesn't always happen because these management plans end up being about 70 pages, and they take a lot of work that goes into looking at the species that are present, the vegetation types, problems that occur on the reserve, such as like ATV use or invasive species. And all of that has to come together to be put into this large management plan that encompasses all of the conservation activities that we're going to do in order to protect that reserve. So that is why sometimes we can't get them done every 5 years. But Samara and I are really working hard this year to try to, get a couple done every single year so we can get on a better schedule for those. And so we also, in consultation with all of you, are going to develop annual work plans, which we sent you in an email and which I'll also go over a little bit later. But this is just based on actions that will be done on that reserve in the year, including the annual inspection and those kinds of things. We also need to provide all of you with guidance, establish an approval process for any sort of management stewardship activities. It's our job to, secure any of the funding that we need to get in order to do any of those stewardship activities. We have to, listen to your feedback when we have our meetings with you and think about how, we can incorporate those things either into management plans or activities that we have planned. Again, identify and hire individuals such as, say, Zane, who helps us with hazard tree removal. So again, it always comes down to your safety and your comfort level, but we do not expect you to be taking down things like massive hazard trees that could harm you if you tried to do those things on your own. We normally do have a small budget where we can hire someone like Zane to get those things done so that nobody has to put themselves at risk. Yeah, and then we also commit to providing you with a field and health safety manual. So we're going to go over that a little bit later too. And again, it's a very large document, but the point is for you to be able to refer to it if you want to see the proper protocol on certain things. And we'll cover a couple of those topics today. But again, it doesn't have to be followed down to every last point, but it basically is for your safety so that you know the proper methods to do certain things. And then I will let you guys read these next little sections on your own, but I'll go over to the steward's role just because I do want to be a little bit conscious of time. And if I go through every document by every point, we'll be here for a lot longer than 2.5 hours. But yeah, so basically the stewardship agreement has our roles and then also your roles. So we would like you to follow the field health and safety manual. Again, like I said, it doesn't have to be line by line, but just, being aware of things. Like if there's a lightning storm, we obviously don't want you to be out. If there's really strong winds, like greater than 35 kilometers an hour, don't be in an old growth forest with trees that could potentially fall on you and hurt you, right? So it's those kinds of things that are mentioned in there that we just want you to be aware of, because again, like we don't want anybody getting hurt. That's the last thing we want. We want you guys to be comfortable and to do the things you enjoy and be out in nature. So then we also, again, normally we'd have you review the management plan, but if your reserve that you steward doesn't have one yet, then we can avoid that point. Again, we want you to consult with us to develop a work plan, like the one we sent you all in emails, which we'll do a couple of back and forths about, and then decide on the activities that will actually be done for that year. And again, the point of having that work plan is that if you let us know of all the activities you want to do, we will put them on that plan, and then you will be covered by the insurance for any of those activities. So if you were to be hurt doing anything like that, then you would be fine insurance-wise. And then we ask that you conduct a minimum of 3 site visits a year, hopefully in the spring, summer, and fall. But we also understand that some of these steward reserves that don't have trails are in very remote locations, can be really difficult to get to. So if you cannot go 3 times a year, then that's okay. Just let us know. Again, keep that open line of communication with us, and that's okay. Again, we have like certain stewards that feel comfortable visiting reserves with us, and that's fine. We can conduct an annual inspection if we have, you know, the time in our schedules to go that year with you, then we will come conduct it with you and make it a little bit easier that way. But yeah, if you do feel comfortable and you can conduct an annual inspection 3 times a year, that's great and that's ideal for us. But again, it's all based on your comfort level and what you can do. If you can complete the annual inspection form that's on the Google Drive, that's also really great. It makes our sort of like data entry that we have to do relating to annual inspections pretty easy. But again, we're the ones getting paid for this, so it's okay if you can't, and we will go around that and do it in a way that we can. And then we also ask that, you know, you don't repair anything like, say, a bridge or, you know, like large structures without consulting us first, because again, there's a lot of approvals that you have to go through and health and safety standards, like when you're putting in something like a bridge. So we would probably hire a professional to do that, just because, you know, if there's people walking on the trail and walking on that bridge and that bridge collapses, then we have a big problem. So yeah, we just ask that you consult us if, you know, there's issues with something like a bridge or a really large structure, and then we can try to tackle that issue together. And if it, you know, is a very expensive thing, then we can look into how we can apply for funding to get those things done. And again, sometimes that is a bit of a slower process, but it's better to do it slowly and the right and safe way than, you know, do a quick fix and then have somebody get hurt in the process. And then, yeah, we just also ask that you don't undertake any sort of really high risk maintenance work, like chainsawing a tree or something like that, if you don't have the correct certifications, or if you don't feel comfortable. Okay. So maybe I will let you guys read the rest of this part on your own as well. But does anyone have any questions about any of those 2 topics, like our responsibilities versus steward responsibilities or your responsibilities, before I kind of keep going?
It's Rick Berry, Gabriella.
Yeah.
I did send you an email with a list of,
yes,
I won't call them concerns, but questions that we have. They'll become concerns eventually. I guess one thing I would like to ask, are these stewardship agreements, are they still, shall we say, negotiable at this stage? Or are we basically what we've been given is what we have to sign?
Yeah, I think like ideally we wouldn't want to change them, just because it's a massive process to go through, going to the lawyers again and then getting Caroline to edit it. But I think if there's something that you're really, really opposed to, maybe we can like talk about it. And if we do have to change it, we can definitely like look into that and see what we can do there. But I mean, ideally, if we could not, that might be easier. But yeah, I mean, if it's something again that you're very opposed to, we can look into what we can do to change that. Okay,
in that case, would it be agreeable to you? I'm not sure if the other stewards have issues like I had.
Yep.
If we do sign off on this stewardship agreement, can we cover it off with a letter to Ontario Nature that said, we have signed this stewardship agreement, but we have the following, what would you say?
Almost like amendments or?
Yes, we will be treating some sections according to blah, and then we'd outline what it is down below. So you still get a signed document, but we'll be on paper saying, you know, for instance, we can't have every one of our volunteers signing off the stewardship agreement. But right now, that's the way it reads. So we cover off with a letter saying, you know, only the authorized person will be signing.
Yeah. So
yeah,
Rick,
and so go ahead,
sorry.
Rick. I mean, Sarah.
Yeah, so Rick, I don't know if the wording isn't clear. I'm happy to go over any questions specific to that your club has had, because I haven't had a chance to see that email yet. But with respect to the club signing off, so York Simcoe Nature Club is a member group of Ontario Nature, and therefore we share the same insurance company. And so you'll see, actually, Gabby, if you scroll down to the insurance, or scroll up to the insurance,
I think it's up here,
section,
yeah.
you'll see that it says in fulfillment of the stewardship agreement, the steward, if an Ontario Nature group will, right? So like that's basically saying that like if you're a member group of Ontario Nature, you yourself have the exact same coverage. So if someone from the club signs off on the agreement, then it is essentially signing off for every member of that club. So as Gabby mentioned in the beginning, if you're part of a club, then you just need the representative of the club to sign. And as long as all the individuals are members of the club, then they're covered by both the club's insurance as well as Ontario Nature's insurance, which is the same insurance company, and it'll just be filed twice basically if there's a grievance. But if you are an individual member who's like just a member of Ontario Nature or a neighbor who isn't a part of a club, then each individual would need to sign. But at a club level, that's not a requirement.
Yes, that I understand, but there is language in this agreement that would give you a different opinion of what's supposed to be happening. I think it's specifically mentioned every volunteer that's going to be working on the property has to sign off on this stewardship agreement. Well, that's obviously not going to happen. So our cover letter would say we are assuming that you just mean the authorized person and not every volunteer. You know, and I had other questions or concerns like this, Gabby. So I'm more than happy to go through with you and Samara and address those points. Oops, something's happened here.
Yeah, I think that sounds great, Rick. And yeah, if there's any if we missed anything, which is totally possible, of like confusing wording or something, we're definitely wanting to hear about that, because you know, if you're concerned about that or confused about that, I'm sure there's other people that are too. So maybe that's just something we didn't catch. So definitely, yeah, we're open to those kinds of things, and we can reword those kinds of things too.
Yeah, I'll sort them out as showstoppers or just clarifications, and then we'll talk about it. Okay, that's me.
Okay, sounds great. Oh, did we lose Gabby? Oh no. Okay, I'll take over until she's back. Okay, sorry, I didn't have the document open because Gabby was kind of walking through this. 1 second. Yeah, so I mean, in terms of the insurance side of things, and that's the reason that we had to include the health and safety manual too, is that was like a directive from our insurance company. And I know some people were shocked by the size of that thing, and I totally understand. It's just kind of more of as a reference manual. So for example, you know, I think most people in this group know to wear closed-toed shoes and long pants if you're going into a place with venomous snakes, and not to have your ankles exposed. But, you know, if you were new to the area and a new steward and not knowing those things, that's where that kind of comes into play, if that makes sense. So yeah, I guess the next thing on the stewardship package was the work plan. So I'm just gonna pull up I'll just pull up the Altberg plan just to keep things kind of simple. Obviously, every plan will look slightly different. We did use standardized wording across all of the plans. So if there's some wording that isn't specific to your property and what's found there, please don't be alarmed. And yeah, I'm just going to share my screen here. And so these plans really are a draft. So as we mentioned in our first email, I know that was a bit of a lengthy email as well. I hope you can all see my screen. But that email basically said, you know, like, this work plan is a draft form. We really do want it to be developed in, you know, concert with our stewards. We want it to include activities that you're interested in, able to take on, are part of your wheelhouse. We don't want to kind of impose anything on you that you're not interested in or don't think is appropriate. So this is really just a draft, and we're welcome to suggestions and do want to have it reflect everything that you want to do. So as Gabby mentioned, we have an annual inspection in here 3 times a year. Again, if you're not able to do this, that's totally fine. It's just kind of our ideal scenario. And all the tasks listed here are kind of what we look for when we do an annual inspection. So if there are trails on your property, we ask that you definitely walk the trails, and then for at least one of your annual inspections. And if there's additional inspections that you're doing, if you feel comfortable and know how to navigate off trail, we recommend that you also walk off trail, because then you sometimes get an idea of other things that you might be seeing. Like, for example, if someone's taking on an unpermitted use, like hunting on the property, then you would they wouldn't be doing that on the trail, right? You wouldn't come across shotgun shells or evidence or hunting blinds or those kinds of things on the trail. It's usually a little bit further into the bush. So you would want to make sure that you, if you feel comfortable again and know how to navigate, go off trail and check those other areas too. And so basically what we look for in an annual inspection are the following. So if this applies, some of our properties do have anthropogenic features like outhouses and benches and picnic tables and that sort of thing, that on an annual basis, if there's any change to anything, like, so for example, if there's a bench that's falling apart, that you take a photo, either take a GPS point on, if you have a GPS or any sort of smartphone device on Google Maps or Google Earth, you can just literally just take, like, if you pull out your Google Maps and you hold on to where that point is, where your blue dot is, you can get a lat long in that and write it down. Or if you have a map, so we also provide a map in the stewardship package on Google Drive. You can just even draw like a red dot and take a photo of it and send it to us. You know, we're open to any way that you want to share location information with us, whatever works for you with whatever kind of resources you have available. And obviously, if you have any questions with any of those things, we're more than happy to walk through them individually with you as well. So the main thing we're looking for with anthropogenic features is if there's any issues, if it needs to be replaced, kind of alerting us to it so that, you know, we can have it on our radar to fix those things and have them updated as needed. In terms of natural changes, so this you'll probably see more off trail or even adjacent to a trail. If there's any major blowdown, again, like Rick mentioned, there was a new beaver dam that came in that's right beside the trail, but on a lot of our properties, we don't have any trails, so you might just come across them. These are just natural features that we'd like to document over time if you happen to walk that area again and again, how it might be developing over time. The points of interest is really only for properties where there are trails, or if that's a point of interest that you'd like to revisit in coming years, or like us to revisit in coming years when we're going and doing an annual inspection. So anything that you might find interesting. And in terms of prohibited activities, the prohibited activities across our properties are pretty much standardized. We don't allow ATV use, bike use, camping, lighting fires, dumping garbage, hunting, off-trail, poaching of animals or plants, snowmobile use, harvesting of trees, and that sort of thing. So just marking that, and if you're comfortable with removing any garbage, you can go ahead, but obviously sometimes the dumped garbage is much larger than something you can carry out. So if it's something that needs to be taken out with machinery or something, definitely let us know, and we're happy to kind of facilitate that. In terms of signage, if you think that there needs to be a new sign erected in a place, for example, If there are a lot of people accessing a property that doesn't have any trails from an adjacent property, we might want to put up a sign close to that border to just say, to that property boundary to say, this is a nature reserve, these are the permitted uses, please do not enter, kind of thing. Or if there's an old sign that's really out of date, falling apart, or you just think, it's outdated information and needs to be replaced, let us know. And we'll work with you to do that. And species list. So this is really based on your level of expertise, your interest. Some people, as have been mentioned today, are interested in invasive species and do want to monitor that. Some people may not actually know how to identify any species, and that's okay too. So just kind of to your comfort level, what you're interested in, what you're able to do, kind of noting any species of interest. And again, if you can take a photo and a GPS point, that's great. Or even if you can just describe to us where that is, that's really helpful for us to know. If there are trails on the property, letting us know about the state of the trails, if anything needs to be checked by us, if Zane or someone else needs to come in and remove any trees that are overhanging or falling on the tree, if there's flooding or erosion of the trail, taking photos and sending it to us so that we can decide what we can do there. Again, if you don't have trails on your property or any sort of anthropogenic features, a lot of this won't be applicable to you. Again, to do with visitation, noting the number of visitors, we really don't know how well used a lot of our trails are, or how often some of our properties that are open to the public are visited. So just even noting the number of people or the number of cars helps us ascertain like just how popular the property is. And I know it's been a huge issue over the past year that a lot of our properties have gotten more traffic through the pandemic. And I mean, if any of you, I know a lot of you are involved with other organizations, and you'll know that everyone is facing the same issue. It is a problem, and we're all trying to figure out how we can tackle this. And so keeping a note of how many cars or people you see can also indicate the increase in usage as well, and just give us some sort of metric. In terms of boundaries, we do usually install boundary signs to denote the property boundaries to our neighbors. There are some cases where we don't, and we would discuss that on a case-by-case basis with our stewards. But we ask that these boundaries be monitored. Obviously, depending on the size of the property, it's not possible to monitor all of the boundaries every year. So even if it's just one section of the boundary every year or something, so that we can kind of rotate and see if there's any emerging threats. Some neighbors may not be aware that we are a nature reserve, so they might be coming in and harvesting or hunting or doing something else. So the boundaries are some places where we find issues. And obviously, if you don't know where the boundaries are, that's totally fair. And we would like to either walk through the boundaries with you or send you maps if you're able to use the maps to determine where the boundaries are. Again, any trail maintenance, if you possess a license or would like to just, if you don't possess a license for mechanized tools, using a handsaw, that sort of thing. And then with bridges, inspecting them. With Altberg, we have an outhouse, so it's, maintaining that, and the parking lot. And Altberg also has salamander cover boards and lots of vernal pools. So this is an additional kind of monitoring opportunity. And again, those are just suggestions. And if the Altberg stewards didn't want to do them, that's totally fine as well. So these are just kind of the things that we got from our conversation, speaking to the stewards of what needed to be done. But obviously, it's all up for conversation and back and forth, because we don't want to set unrealistic goals. So yeah, that's the work plan, and it's meant to be updated on an annual basis. So this is just for the 2021 season. If there are any changes or updates along the way. We understand that things do come up and not everything will be included in this work plan. So any other activities that you as a steward would want to take on or want Ontario Nature to take on, if they come up throughout the year, then we would figure that out at a later date. So we can only plan so much, you know, things do come up. But this is just supposed to be a starting point and to go from there. So yeah, I mean, the work plans, as far as I know, are pretty new concepts. The idea is just that we found that some stewards weren't exactly sure what they were supposed to be doing on an annual basis. And so we just thought this might help give more direction on what data can be collected and what you can let us know about. But of course, we are open to any suggestions and comments that anyone has. So yeah, I mean, I'll open the floor up for questions. If anyone has any questions that you'd like to bring up specific to your property or you think others might have. Rick, I see you've unmuted yourself.
I have a question.
Okay, Jim, do you want to go first and then we'll go to Rick?
Yes, please. So in past years, when we would go and do our survey and do any trail maintenance, we had the members who were volunteering to do it to sign off on a document. It was called a warranty and consent assumption and release. Blah blah blah. Kind of looks like that. But I don't see a blank version of that form anymore. And I'm wondering, has it been revised? Is it, you know, where will I find it?
So yeah, that warranty form was actually just incorporated into our agreement. So that form was basically, yeah, like it no longer exists.
So the thing is, the form actually had everybody who was going to do work would knowingly sign and date it. And so I guess with this stewardship agreement, we won't have that.
Yeah, so the idea with the agreement is that it actually includes like all of what the roles are and the liabilities and the waiver type wording. It's just all within the agreement itself. And so I think this goes back to Rick's question where instead of having every single member of the stewardship team sign it, as long as the representative of the Huron Fringe Field Nat signs it, then you're signing for the entire group. And then that would cover all of the group members, but we would ask that, you know, that information be relayed to the members of the group. And that's the role of the person who signed the agreement and the stewardship group itself.
Oh, okay.
If there's any items that you see that were on the waiver that are not included in the agreement, then we definitely open it up to you for comment on that. Is that the case? Do you think there's something
No, I just didn't realize that we weren't going to be using this anymore. That wasn't clear.
Yeah, so that actually had some problematic wording where it said like you are liable for your own safety and stuff like that, which isn't actually true because you are covered by our insurance. So that's why a lot of that wording was removed, because it was incorrect in saying that volunteers would have to assume full risk, and that's not the case. You actually are covered and through our insurance.
Okay, thanks. That clarifies it for me.
Rick, do you want to go next?
Yes, please. It's a question of clarification. Are you treating the annual inspection form the same as the work plan, or are they two different documents?
Yeah, so the annual inspection form is the form on the Google Drive that we have like a formal form that you can fill out going through all of those points that are in the work plan. So the idea is that this work plan outlines what we ask you to collect during your annual inspection, but the form is where you'd actually fill that out. Again, like I know Rick, for example, like filling forms is kind of complicated for that group. It's not going to work out. That's totally fine. We want all our stewards to enjoy what they're doing and not get bogged down by too many of the details while they're out there. So if you want to just take notes while you're out, send us an email. We can fill out the form on your behalf. We're totally fine with that.
we're actually going to try and use that annual inspection
Oh, you
form
are?
this year.
Okay.
Yes, we are.
Let us know how it goes. And obviously, if you have any
Thank you.
comments or concerns, we're happy to incorporate them in.
Yeah. We do need access to it, and I'm glad to see we're going to talk about the Google Drive, because I've tried using it and it's not working properly for me. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
Actually, in that respect, can I just ask everybody that's on this call, in the letter that you sent out, Smara, you said, just click on this URL and it'll take you to the Google Drive.
Yep.
Which I did. And it's got a bunch of different things I can choose from. But when I click on them, most of them, it comes up with a little icon that says, click here or go to new, and then nothing happens. Has anybody else tried that? Is it just my problem?
I've had no problems. Everything seems to be where it's supposed to be, and I can access it all.
Yeah, I haven't had any problems with Google Drive getting the documents.
Okay, I'll take this up with you then, Samara.
Yeah, I wonder if there's just like a permissions issue or something like that, which, yeah, we can definitely sort out later.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay.
Quick question, just using the annual inspection, do we do one annual inspection for the year, or should we submit the 3 as separate annual inspection documents? Or not submit, save them, 3 separate documents?
Yeah, so we ask again, like if it's possible to go out and do 3 annual inspections a year, like spring, summer, fall. Obviously, if you can't do that many, then that's fine. But we would ask that each visit be a separate form or a separate email or a separate document, whatever works for you. Just because then it'll have different dates and different data might be collected. You know, for example, for Harold Mitchell, you might be observing, you know, different bird species or different plants or that sort of thing. Oh, Gabby's back. Oh, we lost her for a while. I don't know if she can hear us, but
Thanks for
yeah. So
sorry,
go ahead. Sorry, Carrie.
In the past, like we were going out several times, but just choosing one of them to be the official annual inspection. So, and as you're right, like sometimes we might go out with the task of looking for HWA. Sometimes we might go out to look for plant inventory. Sometimes we might go listen for birds. So they would be different and not necessarily all encompassing, but maybe one is more encompassing than the others.
Yeah, and so for example, if for your club it's, you know, getting together an annual inspection form and putting all that information is a bit too onerous, then maybe you can just submit one like full annual inspection form filled out per year, and then emails just with general updates for all your other visits. But ideally we would ask that you have 3 separate annual inspection forms, but again, like we can be flexible with whatever your club is able to do and interested in.
So we'll do what we can do.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. Gabby, can you hear us?
I can. I don't have access to anything because I'm on my partner's laptop, but I can hear you now.
Okay, perfect. No worries. We just went through the work plan and we're just answering some questions. But I can share my screen if you'd like.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you. Sorry, everybody.
Of course, there's technical issues. Like Gabby's never had any technical issues. I'm always the one that has technical issues. So. Okay, perfect. If anyone obviously has any other questions about the work plan or the agreement so far at a later time, and they come up as you're working through things, we're more than happy to kind of answer those at a later date as well. So I'm just gonna pull up the presentation. One second. Can't remember what the next thing was on the agenda, Gabby.
Is it health and safety, or did you already cover that?
No, I didn't cover health and safety.
Yeah,
Okay.
so I think that one's next.
Okay. Do you want to just start chatting a little bit about that while I pull up the presentation and the...
Yeah, absolutely. So I feel like I've mentioned it a few times already, but again, I have it written in the slide. It'll show up when Samara shares it, but our biggest concern is always your safety. Don't ever do anything you don't feel comfortable doing. And if there's a hazard,
Gabby, just one second.
Yep.
Bill has his hand raised. Sorry, I didn't know if it was there before and I didn't notice, Bill.
I just, in all of this chatter, I just have the comment to make that as a general rule, as a steward, I like to consider that the property is mine and to report what I personally would have a problem with if it was mine. And I certainly, if I had a property, I would visit it more than once a year, you know, if it was my property. So there's kind of like a personal responsibility there. And then you would, if it's your property, you would want to know if somebody was crossing your boundary line. Even if it was okay, you would want to know that they were doing that. That's it.
Yeah, that's actually a really great comment, because like as stewards, I feel like you do almost take on that responsibility of, you know, being our eyes and ears on the ground. So yeah, that's a great way to think of it. But yeah, I will, anyways, back to this health and safety stuff. Again, if you ever have any concerns, if you feel like you cannot tackle some sort of a hazard on your own, please let us know. Send us an email. We will deal with it, or we will find someone who we can hire to deal with it, because it should never be your responsibility to, you know, feel like you have to take on these things all by yourself. Like that is what we're here for, to help you out and to make sure that, you know, everything's done safely and correctly and those kinds of things. And yeah, again, like our reason for talking about the health and safety manual is not because we don't think that you all are very capable of handling yourselves outside. Most of you are very avid naturalists or enjoy the outdoors. And so you obviously have a very good idea of the things that you should be bringing with you when you're, say, going out to do a site visit, or, you know, some of the hazards that might be out there, like ticks or venomous snakes, if you have those in your area. So yeah, the reason for us just going over this is just to let you know that the health and safety manual is here for your reference, but to just give a couple of refreshers on certain topics if people, you know, may need them.
Can everyone see my screen? Sorry, just wanted to check.
I can see it.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, I can see it. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Awesome. Okay, so yeah, I can talk about a couple of these topics, but basically what we wanted to cover with the chainsaw or motorized equipment usage section is just if you are going to be using any of these heavy motorized tools, please make sure you have the certifications. And if you do have those certifications, please share them with us, because we need to have that information before you're going out and doing any of these things. And again, if there's any sort of like major maintenance that's being done, even if you are comfortable with it, please let us know about it before it gets done, again, so that if it's not in the work plan, we can add it to the work plan, and those kinds of things. And we're just making sure that you are being covered by the insurance for any of these things you're taking on, even if you are certified. And then when it comes to things like ticks, you all may or may not be aware, but the black-legged tick can carry Lyme disease. And so if you are in areas, or maybe in areas you don't know there are ticks, just be aware to, you know, tuck in your pants into your socks, to be doing tick checks. If you do happen to have a tick attached to you, take a look at what black-legged ticks versus, say, something like dog ticks look like, so that you can know, okay, if it's just a dog tick, like it's probably okay. If you feel unsafe, you also can take that to your local health unit and they can submit it. But I feel like your biggest concern is if you get a black-legged tick that does attach to you. In those cases, like it's not always like a high chance that that tick is carrying Lyme disease, but you always want to be careful. So if you do have a tick attached to you, You can use like a tick remover tool, which are very commonly found at places like Lee Valley Tools or those kinds of things. Or you can just take tweezers and you can physically try to remove that tick, just making sure you're pulling really slowly when you're pulling it out, because you want to be, because sometimes what can happen is if you just quickly pull out that tick, that head stays in there and it basically vomits into your, like vomits out what's in it into your skin, which sounds pretty gross, which it kind of is, but you just want to make sure that if there is something in there that you're not getting that inside of you, and you can pull that out, and then you're going to take that tick, put it in a little tiny container or a baggie or anything you have, and bring that to the health unit to get checked for Lyme disease. Because if it is a carrier, then you are going to have to go on some sort of medication, on that medication even before that tick has been tested. If you feel like you are in a very high risk area and just want to get on that right away, because Lyme disease can be very serious, especially if not treated. So you really, really want to be aware, again, making sure you're tucking your pants into your socks. If you're in a high risk area, doing tick checks throughout the day, those kinds of things, just to be careful. I know a lot of you are aware of this stuff already, but it's just something that everybody should know. And if you don't know it, then hopefully you follow these rules. And then when it comes to things like venomous snakes, in Ontario, we do have the Massasauga rattlesnake, which is a pygmy rattlesnake. The venom is actually not that bad, but still, you just never know. It's like a bee sting. Some people could have a really bad reaction if they are bitten by a Massasauga rattlesnake, just like with a bee. So if you are in an area where you do have Massasauga rattlesnakes, just be careful, right? Don't go out wearing flip-flops. Please wear closed-toed shoes or like rubber boots, or even better, because again, if they even try to get you, they're not going to get through your rubber boot. They're just going to kind of bounce against it. But be aware when you're walking through those areas, right? Like those snakes don't want to hurt you. They're just trying to live their lives. And you know, they do sometimes rattle when they feel threatened, but sometimes they don't. So just keep your eyes peeled when you're walking in those areas and try to be careful and again respectful to the wildlife that's living in those areas. Again, I feel like a lot of you already know this information, but I think it's always good to just get a little refresher on those kinds of things. And then again, like heat stroke is.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, yep.
I see Rod has his hand raised. Rod, do you want to ask a question?
I just want to mention something with around ticks and Lyme's disease. Lyme disease. I've been treated for it. I do regular tick checks. I have my little tick remover on my keychain. The deer ticks, black-legged ticks, are very small, and it's not always possible to see them. They tend to find spots where they're not easily seen on your body. And it was a bullseye rash, a variation of the bullseye rash that had me go to seek medical attention, and sure enough, that's what had happened. So it's tick checks are great. You need to do them, but you may not 100% of the time find the tick that can pass along the Lyme disease. So if you don't know what the bullseye rash is, there are lots of good examples online, and they are pretty diagnostic. When you see them, yeah, you'll know, and you'll know to go get medical attention. And it is a pretty heavy duty course of antibiotics, but it works.
Yeah,
so that's
absolutely.
Me done.
Thanks, Rod. Yeah, and sometimes even if the tick is carrying Lyme disease, a bullseye won't show up. So, I mean, always better to be safe than sorry. All right. But yeah, so when it comes to heat stroke is very intensive. I feel like at the point where you're getting heat stroke, we are very far along. But, you know, you can get things like heat cramps, or you can get heat exhaustion. There are sort of things that like lead up to getting heat stroke. And so, yeah, the point of us just bringing up this slide is, you know, you all probably do know this, but when you are going out in the field, especially in the summertime, but even sometimes in the spring, like your body's not used to, you know, that warm temperature because you're just getting over winter. So your body can dehydrate really quickly. You can heat up really fast. Again, we all are guilty of getting that spring sunburn on that first sunny day when we forget to put on sunscreen and we're just too busy enjoying the warmth. But yeah, we have to be really careful with things like heat exhaustion and heat stroke because it can come about really quickly. And so just making sure that when you're going out on warm or hot days that you're wearing a hat, that you're wearing, you know, the proper clothing, that you're making sure to bring water and bring more water than you think you need, because who knows, maybe you run into somebody on your reserve, if it has a trail or maybe if it doesn't, that is experiencing symptoms of heat stroke or heat exhaustion and needs water. So it's always good to have extra just in case, you never know. But yeah, just making sure to be aware that it can happen to anybody, especially if, you know, you're just enjoying the nice weather. Yeah, we just have to make sure, you know, drinking water, wearing the right clothing, wearing hats, and making sure to take breaks, right? Don't push yourself too hard. Again, it's always about your safety and making sure that you are working at a level that you are comfortable with. We do appreciate everybody with all the hard work they do with, you know, removing invasive species and going to these reserves and doing these checks. But like I've said, and I'll say again, your safety is the most important thing. So take care of that. And then, yeah, when it comes to something like lightning or thunderstorms, we don't want anybody to be out in the lightning. If there is lightning, please stop whatever you're doing. If you really want to like continue working that day, maybe go to your car. You can wait half an hour, and if you know the lightning subsides, you can choose to keep working. But I feel like if you know it's a crazy thunderstorm and there's lightning, your productivity won't be that great anyway because you're probably going to be wet and miserable. So it's better to just like call it and you know come back a different day. Your safety again is the biggest concern. So yeah, those are just a couple of the things that we're bringing up. I think like another thing to mention that I did bring up a little earlier is just wind. So if you are working in a forested area and there is wind speeds at greater than 35 kilometers an hour, and I think you can actually find that out from the weather app on your phone, or if you check the computer before you go, you can feel when it's like a very strong wind. There's no point working. You just don't want to get hit by a tree. I think that's actually like probably the scariest and like the one risk that people don't really think about when they're walking in the woods, but it could be the most dangerous, right? Like these trees are beautiful, majestic things, but they can be really heavy. And if you're on a reserve that's like pretty remote, it could be really hard for us to find you or for you to contact somebody if something like this were to happen. So if it's really windy, just don't go out in a really like tall, large treed area. Oh, Samara, I think your email is up. Okay. Yeah, so
I was trying to pull up the agenda, sorry.
Oh, no worries, no worries. Yeah, so our next slide is the Google Drive. Yeah, I wonder if you would be able to pull up the Google Drive, Samara. I'm so sorry because I'm on a different computer. I don't have like access to everything.
Would you be able to open the Google Drive if you logged in using the Nature Reserve login there?
I can, but I only have one screen on this laptop, so it would be difficult to like share my screen and do everything. That's the only. And then I can go through everything in the drive if you can just, yeah, pull it up on your screen. And I just have Willoughby's open as an example, but you can open any of them. Just so you all know, everybody's Google Drives are set up pretty similarly. But sometimes with different reserves, like say Sydenham, we have a lot of other different documents because we have a pretty large scale restoration project occurring there, and they do salamander monitoring and different things like that. So certain reserves will have a couple more folders, but every reserve will have these basic folders that we're going to be talking about. And even if you aren't super computer savvy, it probably is a good idea to familiarize yourself with the Google Drive because it's really great for sharing photos because as some of you probably know, it's really hard to share photos over email because sometimes the files are just too large. So with Google Drive, you can just upload all of your photos to the Google Drive and they are there, and then both us and you can access them at any point. So it is handy in that sense, and especially like sharing documents like the work plans or the stewardship agreements. It makes those things really easy.
Sorry, I have to log into our nature reserves thing and I needed to look up the password.
Oh, don't worry. Yeah, I'm so sorry, guys. Honestly, I don't have technical difficulties often, but I think my laptop is going to the laptop graveyard very soon.
Yeah, I think you can share a screen on a single. I've done it before, but I will not have everything open.
I know, and I don't know how to use, like, this computer is a Mac and I don't have a Mac.
Oh, okay,
So
that makes things
I like don't even know how to like do a lot of things on it.
Okay, sorry about the delay, everyone. I'm just pulling it up. Give me one more second. Okay, share my screen. I see it. Okay, never mind. Can everyone see this?
Yep. Okay. Yeah, so everybody's drive will look pretty similar to this, like I said. We're just going to use Willoughby as an example. Sorry, Renzo, all your information might be visible, but there's not too much that would be incriminating on here, so you don't have to worry. So yeah, they'll all look very similar. You have these different folders where you can access different things. So the work plan, for example, Samara, if you want to just click onto there. Well, I guess it's an empty folder, but this would be where your work plan is stored once we've finalized it and gone through everything that we'll be doing together.
Yeah, so the reason we didn't put that in was just if we were going to have a lot of back and forth and have multiple versions, we didn't want to have too many versions in there that would be confusing. So your work plan, the draft work plan was sent to you via email. So if you don't have any problems with it, just let us know and we'll add it in here.
Yep, and then so the next one will be stewardship agreements and waivers. If there's past agreements you've signed, they'll be located there. If not, that folder will be empty. And then there's the current stewardship agreement, which again, like we said, we're going to wait for the signed version. And then we're going to, if you guys can upload the signed version yourselves, please do that. If not, we will upload it there once you've sent it to us. Then the next thing will be reference documents and policies. So in here, you're going to be able to find different policies that we have for you. You can read through them on your own time. Again, some of them are only 1 to 3 pages. And then like some, like the health and safety manual, are a large number of pages. But I mean, all of this stuff is worth going through if you have some time. Like we have stewardship resources, so different sites you can visit. Exactly, like you can look at the Endangered Species Act. You can look at a website about the Invasive Species Center. They're a great resource to have where you can read up about all different invasive species, whether they're mammals, fish, plants, whatever, and you can get all the details on kind of what's going on in terms of recent research or just simple ID guides on how to see what those species are. And so, yeah, this resources doc is like pretty good if you have some time to go through it. Then we have our Ontario Nature Invasive Species Policy. That's just how we tackle invasive species if you're curious. And it's good to know because you'll probably be the boots on the ground implementing some of that stuff or helping us implement that kind of stuff and run events. We have our health and safety manual in there. And so, yeah, I mean, if you guys do have the time, I would definitely recommend looking at all of these policies, but I do understand some of them are pretty long, so they take a while to get through, but they are pretty useful information that we've kind of worked to put together for you.
Yeah, and also like if, for example, you're like really interested in tackling invasive species, then you might just choose to read the invasive species policy because that pertains to your activities. And then that might help like with our conversations as well moving forward as to what management techniques we can take on and that sort of thing.
Yeah, and then, yeah, Samara, if you just click out of there. Yep, then we have the management plan folder. So that would be where your management plan for your reserve is if you have one. I think a few of you won't have one at this point, so there will either be just like a blank template in there, And eventually we will be putting that full management plan in there, so you'll have access to it. Again, that will be a large document as well, but it's very helpful because it provides like a very detailed description of the reserve and the species found there. Again, we try to keep management plans pretty confidential because especially if you are on a reserve with a large number of species at risk, we don't want other people other than our stewards and us to have access to that information because, you know, a lot of species are subject to persecution, or in terms of things like turtles, people will poach their eggs. So we have to be very careful with that type of information. And then this annual inspection and monitoring folder, Samara, if you want to click in there. This is probably the one with sort of the most information, but in here you get like a couple of things. So there's a map of your nature reserve, in this case, oh, sorry, Samara. So a map of your nature reserve, a KML file, which again, because of my technical difficulties, I may not be able to show you how to open the KML file, but what I can do is just, I'll add a document in here about how to open your KML file, but most simply put, all you have to do to open it up on your own computer is download this KML file and download Google Earth Pro. Yeah, exactly. And
then once it's downloaded, it'll just be a file like in your folders, and then you just click on it. And if you have Google Earth downloaded, then it'll just automatically open.
Yeah. There's like 2 ways to go about it. So I think you can open it that way, or you can open your Google Earth Pro, and then there's a section where you can add like a KML file. So you just click add, and then you select it. Oh, I think Steve has a question. Let's see, just gonna open that in the chat.
Yeah, I was just actually just related to the insurance question. It seems incredibly unfair that in, say, a 300-acre property like the one that I'm the steward of, if somebody walks onto it and they injure themselves, that somehow the reserve, the Ontario Nature Reserve, would be held or could be held liable. And I'm just wondering whether that's actually a history of this ever occurring successfully. I mean, I know a lawyer would tell you that you need insurance, but realistically speaking, has anybody actually ever launched a successful claim for this?
Yes, Mary, maybe you can answer this one because
as far as I know, no. But I do know of other nature reserves where there is a trail, and there have been claims where someone like trips and falls on a trail or something like that. But again, like that liability claim would be submitted to us, not like if it's a member of the public, like that would be submitted to Ontario Nature, and the stewards wouldn't be held liable at all in any way. But yeah, I personally have not heard of that happening with a remote property where there's no trails and no access.
Okay, thank you. That's pretty reassuring.
Yeah. I mean, oh, go ahead. Cameron, is that you?
May I make a comment?
Absolutely.
May I make a comment?
Yep.
It's the same as the sidewalk in front of your house. Normally, you're not liable if somebody trips and falls or whatever. But if there's something that the law decides is a trap, something unusual, which is going to be a danger to somebody, and you don't do anything about it, then you can be liable.
Yeah, so hazard trees are a really good example of this. Unfortunately, a number of years ago on a managed property, not Ontario Nature, but there was a field trip, and unfortunately a child was hit by a falling tree and they passed away. And so because of that, now there's way more rigorous management when it comes to dealing with things like hazard trees. So yeah, that's again, one of those things we have to be very careful of. And if we do have trails on our reserves, we have to be looking for, you know, those widowmakers or sections of trees that could potentially fall onto the trail and hurt somebody. So yeah, that's a great example, or a great analogy, Cameron. It's a good way to put it.
I think someone else had their hand raised. I got a notification. Was it Stuart?
Yeah, it was just, we have examples of the Conservation Authority that where there's a person who got injured after going across a barrier that said, do not go any farther. They fell. And although there was no, it didn't go through the courts, there was a settlement outside the courts, just because it's going to be more expensive for the Conservation Authority to go through the court. So it does happen. It's just something we need to be aware of.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions?
Laura, I had a question. Yes, Emily?
Go ahead.
Okay. I put it on the chat, but in our group, people were wondering if we had someone with us who was helping us, but because we're not a club, they're just someone that says, let me give you a hand with that, and they get injured. Are we personally liable for any injury that they sustain?
No, the claim would be on Ontario Nature. And then what we'd ask is that, you know, if you're carrying out any activity, that you do it with the same safety precautions you'd take yourself as a steward. But yeah, all the claims would be submitted directly through Ontario Nature. It's a great question.
Even though that person hasn't signed anything.
Yeah, so I mean, that's where it comes to, like, if someone was just walking, for example, on a trail on one of our properties, they haven't signed anything. They've just walked on our property, right? So speaking to Gabby's example, again, not on an Ontario Nature property, but they submitted a claim and, you know, went to court for that. So anyone who walks on the property could technically, you know, pursue legal action with Ontario Nature.
But this person would be helping a steward. This would not be a person taking a casual walk. This person would be helping us.
Yep. So it's the same answer. It's that it would be through Ontario Nature, because your insurance cover, like, you as an individual steward is different than someone who's not a steward, right? So like, either way, anyone who's not anyone, including you, the member of the public, someone that helps you, it's all the same process of submitting a claim to Ontario Nature. The only thing that we would ask is, if you're asking someone to help you on the property for an activity, that it be something that, you know, we've discussed, or an activity that's in our work plan, or we've figured out, you know, just getting prior consent for anything that's a risky activity or something like that, so that we make sure we know what's going on, and that you follow the same precautions you would as a steward for your own safety, as well as the safety of whoever you're bringing with you.
For instance, Samara, trying to deal with garlic mustard and doing garlic mustard pulls, there have been occasions when school children, a group of school children, have come out to help. So if one of those kids happens to get injured.
Yeah, so I've always sent them a waiver. I don't know if you're aware, but I always send Lisa Chitty, the school teacher, I send her a waiver for the kids' parents to sign, and they all go through that and sign it and send it to me prior to coming.
Okay.
All right.
Well, I have another question.
Yeah.
I'm concerned about your health and safety manual. It is so ultra specific that if it's not followed to the letter, I wouldn't be surprised if an insurance company said, oh, you haven't abided by the health and safety manual, sorry, there is no coverage. Instead of having a standard of care, a conceptual standard of care, there are all these specifics. I could never remember all the specifics, you know, how to hold a hammer and
How to slide your hands on an axe handle.
it seems to me to be a perfect case for insurance companies to say, no, you didn't slide your hand properly along the handle. So you've got no insurance.
Yeah, and
it might be worth having a second look at that.
Yeah, and so the point of the health and safety manual is just kind of to guide you with how to do these things. It doesn't mean you have to do them, you know, right down to the exact way, but it's meant to give someone who's never done it before sort of the best explanation possible on how to do it. But yeah,
that may not be. That may not be what a lawyer for the insurance company says. That's all I'm saying. It's a perfect case for insurance companies to deny liability. What you need is a standard. Set up a standard of care. This is the way you should approach safety. You can do it in a sentence.
Yeah, I understand where you're coming from, Cameron, and you know we've had these conversations internally, and the main issue with that is that you know we have stewards of all different backgrounds, all different abilities, all different experiences, and so you know if Ontario Nature doesn't provide any guidance to stewards on how to carry out activities, then you know we're not doing our part by like providing information to our stewards. I think again, like I totally understand where you're coming from in terms of the insurance company commenting those types of things, and I mean that's something I can definitely bring up with our insurance representative to see kind of what the process would look like. I will admit, like, we haven't had any of these issues, thank goodness. And we want to provide all of our stewards with the tools to make sure that, you know, everyone's always maintaining their safety. But yeah, that definitely wasn't the intent of the manual, was to say how exactly you should hold a hammer. It's more just guidance. And, you know, like all of our staff read through this manual for our field work. Obviously, these are instructions for the best case scenario when you have everything on you to be able to do certain activities. You know, we're in the field for like 10 days. We may not have brought, you know, all the equipment that we needed. And sometimes we do have to improvise. And, you know, it's again, like not following it specifically to a T, but using it as guidance on how we carry out our activities safely to ensure our own safety as well. But I do hear you, Cameron, and I will bring that up and let you know what we hear back from our insurance company about that as well. Because at the end of the day, the point of doing all this work and reworking the agreement and providing like all that information about the insurance is that so that all our stewards would know that they are covered, because in previous versions that wording wasn't clear, and that was where a lot of concerns came about. So we definitely don't want that sentiment moving forward. So we definitely take those concerns seriously, and yeah, we'll definitely get back to you on that.
Smira.
Yeah.
It's me, Renzo.
All I'm suggesting.
Yeah, Renzo?
Yeah, okay. I apologize. Let me just give you my 2 cents. I spent 40 years in the occupational health and safety field, and the latter part was under the auspices of the Ministry of Labor, not as an employee, but one of the organizations under their wing. For the previous 38 years, it was under the Workers' Compensation Board. I just wanted to make it very clear. There's the general duty clause in any occupational legislation, which obliges an employer, and in this case, since we are in a way volunteers to an organization, it's your obligation to have a system in place that takes all precautions reasonable under the circumstances. So getting back to the general question, I don't think the insurance company is going to be picky and go into every procedure. That's impossible. Province of Ontario, with thousands and thousands and thousands of organizations and hundreds of thousands of different processes, no one will ever look into the specifics. But we're under the obligation of the general duty clause, which is to take all precautions reasonable under the circumstances. Then typically they'll say, well, what would a reasonable person do? And what's the best practice? So if you're going to look at chainsaw operations, you're going to default to what's best known. If you want to look at tick prevention, then they'll look at what the general science is saying. So I'm going to have to argue the point. The insurance company will always have to look at what you did as the intent and the course of action. By making a general statement and saying, you know, go for it and good luck, I don't think it's not gonna buy it. The province will hold you accountable, but they won't necessarily hold you accountable if you have a policy, if you have procedures, if you have a manual. You're starting to do your due diligence. You're doing what's right. Your manual is not written in stone, so it's a progressive thing, eligible for changes as the science moves. And so, you know, I think you're more in trouble if you didn't have the procedures manual than if you did. That's just coming from 40 years of experience and working with the ministry at a fairly high level and workers' compensation. Trust me, the last thing you want is to walk into an organization without a policy, without a manual, without procedures. That is already a kiss of death, and the insurance company damn well knows that.
Thank you so much, Renzo. That was so well explained. All right. Yeah, if anybody doesn't have any more questions, maybe we'll just wrap up on looking at the Google Drive. And then we do still have some time for additional questions that aren't related to anything we've covered. Again, I will have to send you guys a little bit of detail on how to open those KML files on your computer. And I can even send you something about how to open them on your phone, because then when you're out on the reserve, you can actually, if you have a smartphone, take a look at those things. And you can see where the boundaries are as you're walking. So it's a very helpful thing to have. I mean, as Ontario Nature staff, we have tablets. So we have basically that same process, but on our tablets, and it makes things very, very helpful. And if you ever get lost, you can use that to navigate out to the road. So also very handy if you're at a reserve with no trails, or even if you are on a reserve with trails and you're not very familiar with them. Okay, so Samara, if you want to go back to the Google Drive. Yeah, so I think I talked about, so we just got through the KML. There's also steward volunteer tracking. Hours, like a document in here. You can definitely do that if it's an easy way to show us how many hours you've worked. And we use this for a number of things, including, you know, funding applications, or when we're putting out a call for donors and things like that. It's nice to say, you know, we have, say, 26 stewards at all of our nature reserves, and they've put in, you know, 10,000 hours altogether. Like, that kind of information looks really nice, and it normally does help our cause a little bit. So if you have the time to do that, that is really great, and it's so helpful to us. Again, if you don't want to put it in the Google Drive, you can just send us an email if you keep track of those things and just say, hey, just so you know, I volunteered 170 hours this year. And that's all we need. Then we also have species checklists for reserves. Some reserves actually, if they're newer, don't have a species checklist, but that's okay. We don't expect you guys to be experts and be able to identify every single thing you're seeing. But if you do know some of the stuff you're seeing, a great thing that you can do is you can add it to our species checklist form in the annual inspection folder. So Samara, if you want to just click on that annual inspection folder.
I'm not good at guessing where your mind's going.
Yeah, no worries, no worries. So then in there, this is also a place where you can add photos, but I'm just gonna go to the annual inspection data entry Excel sheet first so that we can look at that. And so when you open this, there's a few tabs on the bottom, and they all relate to different sections of that annual inspection form that you can or can choose not to fill out if it's a little too onerous for you. But if you click on the second tab, that's the species list tab. And in here, you can honestly just put the common name of the species. If it is a species at risk and you know that, taking a GPS point like a latitude and longitude or even a UTM, that's fine. That's really helpful to us because again, we use all of that data to then apply for funding or to do our reporting at the end of the year. And again, we can't get to every reserve every year. So having you guys as boots on the ground really helps us. But if you can identify those species, that's also okay. If you see something like a robin or a cardinal, you can also write those things down. This form is also really helpful for things like invasive species. So I know we have discussions and we know that, you know, say there's garlic mustard at Lost Bay or, you know, buckthorn at Cotswold. If sometimes you could just take like a GPS point of like one location and put that in here, that's actually so helpful for us because we can create maps and then we can use those maps to apply for funding so that we can host invasive species removal events and those kinds of things. So it's very helpful for that. But this form is very easy to fill out. You don't have to put the scientific name, but if you can put the common name, if it's a species at risk, the GPS, you don't have to put the datum and accuracy if you don't have to. Not a lot of people have access to that. Like if you have a GPS device, sometimes you can check the accuracy. If you can't, that's okay. The date, you don't have to put any notes, but if you have notes, you can. Who you are and what your email is also basically the information we need because then we can go and enter this into our big overall species list for the nature reserve. And so those things are important for that. But this form is very easy to fill out. You just click on the boxes you want to fill in and you just type in the different answers to those things. Okay, and so let's see, I'm just gonna get out of this one. And then the last thing I'll talk about is just putting photos into the drive. So if you click on this photos folder like Samara is about to do, and then you right click, you have the option of uploading files. And so if you've already put your photos onto your computer, which I feel like most people do because your camera memory card fills up really fast, you can just hit upload files and then that will bring you into your, you know, Explorer tab or whatever it's called on Apple devices where you can navigate your folders and then select where you have those photos. And then you can just click on them exactly like Samara is doing. And you can either hit the open or upload button depending on what your computer gives you as an option. So it's very simple, it's very fast. You don't have to worry about not having enough space to upload, those kinds of things. And you can share any photos you want to share with us from the reserve, or if there's species that you took photos of, different things like that. Even if you have unknown species, if you see something very cool on the reserve and you're like, hey, what is this? Maybe Gabby and Samara can help me ID it. So if you take some photos, you can upload it and then just send us an email and say, hey, I put this in the photos folder on the drive. Can you tell me what it is? So sometimes we can help you with that and ID something, or maybe find a new species for those the reserve or those kinds of things. So it's very, very easy to navigate that. I would highly recommend you guys, if you haven't already taken a look at the drive, do that. Try to go through some of these folders. Try to do some of the things we've done today just to get like familiarize yourself. And again, there's no pressure. You don't have to add things into this drive if you don't feel comfortable and you're not very tech savvy, but it's really, really easy and it's really helpful for us. But again, it's down to your comfort level. And if you feel that you want to, you definitely can. And if you don't have to, and you can send us emails. You can actually send us physical mail if you want. But either way, whatever you're comfortable with.
And I just wanted to add, like, if you're uploading photos, it's really helpful if you put the date that you saw something and your name as well. If there's like, I know for some nature reserves, there's just one steward. Like for Willoughby, we just have Renzo. But for other properties, we have 10 stewards. And so, you know, if we want to follow up to say, hey, where did you find this? This is a species at risk, or this is a really bad invasive species. We need to know where it is and get to it right away. That can help us too. So yeah, putting your name on it and the date would be really helpful when you name the file in this folder. And I think Carrie had raised her hand. Carrie, if you want to go ahead.
I did. I was back on the annual inspection sheet. Just a tip I found helpful was to select the whole document and choose wrap text. Yeah, I've found for each individual cell, and I was like, hold on, I can just do it for the whole document and wrap text for the, I guess for each sheet. I help. Yeah, just my little tip. I do have one other question. I don't know if now's a good time. When I took over as steward, in the past, our club kept a species list and updated the date that we last observed it or noticed it. So we have this ongoing list. Are those lists being used, or that are no longer being sent in that format to Ontario Nature? Or is that something we were just doing for ourselves anyways? I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think you're referring to the species checklist. I think Samara's opening it right now.
Oh, okay. So I'm actually ahead of my question. I'll be quiet.
No, you're not ahead. We did kind of bring it up, but some reserves don't have them. Like Gananoque Lake, which is newer, doesn't have a checklist yet. So I didn't, so some won't have them, but yeah, most of them do actually have a checklist that you can do that for. It just depends on, again, comfort level. If you want to work with the sheet, that's fine. Either way, we can get the information through this or through that Excel sheet that went with the annual inspection form. They definitely both work.
The checklist certainly is useful, and I've just been figuring out best format to put that in, and so I'm open to ideas.
Yeah, I wonder, this might be worth putting in an Excel sheet instead of a Word, but I think, either way, it still does its purpose, but yeah, maybe for filling it out, it might be easier to have an Excel sheet.
We also got a comment a while back, like 7 minutes ago. Sorry, Dave, I didn't see this. He said the What 3 Words app would be handy to include in with Latin long. It's very easy and accurate for those maybe that don't have access to a GPS. I honestly don't know much about this What 3 Words thing. Dave, you brought it up during our last meeting. And I don't know if you can speak to it more or if other people know about it, but apparently there's just 3 words associated with like grid squares across the whole world. And, but I confess I'm not too familiar with it, but yeah, I mean, we're open to whatever works for you.
Yep.
Yeah, if you can hear me, I was going to say that we started using it only to recognize that the latitude and longitude coordinates, the reason the What 3 Words came out is because it is very user-friendly for those that don't enjoy just the decimal places to locate something. It's quite easy, especially with the app. While you're there, you just push the button and the words come up, and it's easy to use then.
I feel like I said I was going to download this app and I never did. So I'm doing it, and then I'm going to test it out too, and I'll let you know what I think. It's a very cool concept though. And absolutely, if there was something that would make it easier for people entering data, especially not having to, think about 6 decimal points at the end of each number, why not, right? If we can still get that location information, that's great.
Sorry, I missed the introduction there. Is that the app called GPS Data?
I think Dave said it's called What 3 Words.
Okay, because there is another app that you can download. It's called GPS Data, and it's also very easy to use. It runs on Android phones because that's what I've got. So you could also check that and see. Very easy to use.
Awesome.
And can I also add, when you were talking about the photos, we've had awkward situations, well, not awkward, problems with volunteers going out and taking photos on our property. And they attach them to the report. And what you get back is something that is a little cryptic note at the bottom that says, P107331. So you don't know what date, you don't know where it was or anything else. So it's really important if we post stuff to the drive, that it has to have a date and it has to have some words that say where it is and what it is.
Yeah, and if it's even more helpful, you can like create folders within that photo drive. Like if you want photos for May 2021, you can make a May 2021 folder just by left clicking and hitting like a create folder button. So if that's an easier way, like if everyone's like, oh, I don't want to label my 200 photos from my May 23rd visit, then if they want to put it in that way, that's also fine, as long as they're sticking to that folder, you know, and not putting June 2021 photos in the folder type thing. So whatever is more helpful. We can always extract the data and, you know, again, relabel those photos if we had to. It's just, yeah, easier for us if they are named and dated right away. But yeah, we can definitely try to make it work if, yeah.
And I also ask, on the Google Drive, do you have a separate block for every one of the properties?
Like
So
a drive folder?
Yeah.
Yeah, so on Google Drive, you've got, you know, I'll call it a box that's Cawthron-Mulock Nature Reserve, and then you've got another box for some other reserve. And
yes,
we're busy posting files into those boxes, right?
Yep.
How do you guys keep track of what's going on?
Yeah, so
I mean,
normally
are you going through and checking every box like every week kind of thing?
Not every week, no.
No, yeah. Normally like monthly or bi-monthly, and it's definitely easier when we have an intern because then that can be like an easy task for them to go through, check if there's any new things that have been uploaded and make sure those are added to our like Ontario Nature larger, you know, say species list for Willoughby or species list for Cawthron-Mulock, those kinds of things.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no worries.
And obviously, if there's something that you've uploaded there that needs attention, like a trail issue or something like that, if you send us an email saying, hey, I uploaded a bunch of stuff, like this needs immediate attention, then we'll check it. So that's also an option too, you know, because sometimes with photos, they're too large to just attach to an email. So that's an option as well.
That's exactly what we will be doing.
Yeah.
Great. Awesome.
Sounds great.
All right. Yeah, that's kind of it for our summaries of the documents, the drive, the health and safety manual. And I did just want to finish before we all leave, or I know a few of us have left already, but I did just want to say thank you to everyone for being a steward, for caring about these areas, and for really putting in the time and effort to help us to manage these reserves, because we definitely would not be able to do it without you. But yeah, now we can open up the floor to any general questions that people may have.
Just a comment.
Absolutely.
In the Google Drive, where you've got stewardship, you have the heading. It's called Stewardship Agreement and Waivers.
Yes.
Since there aren't any more waivers, you may want to just call that Stewardship Agreement, because it kind of implies something that doesn't exist anymore. Yeah,
true. I should just relabel that. We had like existing docs for
past
everybody.
agreements and waivers, but from here on out, you just have a stewardship agreement. So.
Yep, absolutely. I will definitely change that. I will take out waivers from all of them.
I would like to say thank you so much to Gabriella and Smera for actually setting this up. We should be doing this more often. You've got a whole bunch of people here all sharing the same concerns, you know, pursuing the same objectives. And it's been great for me just to hear the kind of concerns that are coming up, to know that we're not all alone on our reserve. You know, Ontario Nature staff talk to everyone. I've never talked to any single one of these other stewards in my life. So it's really helpful. I would really encourage you to do this. This is an introductory one. We had a lot of stuff to get through.
Yeah.
Future ones could focus more on, you know, common issues we face, like what are people doing about, I'll pick one, off-leash dog walkers. There's a good one to start with, right?
Another 2-hour meeting.
You know, and doing this by Zoom is actually better than trying to do it in person. Because
because then nobody has to
far away.
travel, right? Like even if COVID wasn't a thing, it's really hard to get everybody together when we're located in places all across Ontario. So yeah, I think obviously COVID sucks, but one thing it's done is made us all familiarize ourselves with Zoom and made this possible. So yeah, Rick, to what you said, we definitely want to make sure we're doing this orientation meeting every year. But if people are interested, we could look into the option of, maybe hosting like a different webinar about topics that people are interested in that the stewards are interested in, or having like a little discussion meeting about certain topics like off-leash dogs or different things. And people can choose to join or not, right? Because different reserves have trails and some don't and those kinds of things. So yeah, absolutely.
You get my support. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Rick.
Yeah, and if anyone has any ideas for future discussions or meetings, or if there's interest, definitely follow up with us, because if we know certain people are interested in meeting more often or something, that's great for us to know for future planning, because we don't want to plan something that isn't something that everyone's interested in.
Well, you know, the invasive species one is common to pretty much all of us.
Yeah.
The more you could teach us about recognizing them and dealing with them better.
You know, it's good for me, but you know, we're in a very fortunate position that Ontario Nature is a relatively short drive away from where we are. So I think we take a lot of your time, and I really appreciate that. From what I can hear, some of the other stewards are lucky if they see you once a year. You know, sometimes I see you twice a month.
Yes.
And it's always a pleasure.
Carrie, do you have a question?
Yeah, I'm just thinking of future references back to that species checklist. Something I was struggling with because it's listed alphabetically by common name. That's something I've been trying to coordinate for usability and standards. So an item maybe to future discussion or follow up.
Yeah, and we've talked about changing it to an Excel spreadsheet so that you can sort by whatever you want, so that you're not like bound by that too, because we have species lists for each property that are much more complicated than that, because they list to NHICs, tracking species list, and all these other things. So we don't want to make yours that complicated, but we can work on transferring them to Excel spreadsheets so that you can sort by common name or a scientific name, or by year, or by person. So depending on what you're looking for, it might make it a bit easier too. Think it's a little tight to do that for this field season, but something we can definitely do for the future if people would find that helpful.
Or just, grouping for, I guess, asters.
Yep.
And goldenrods, or so you can find the section and then go to the more particular. So just, working on it.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
So with regards to garlic mustard, I understand it makes a pretty good salad, and it's pretty good as pesto as well. Let people know.
Yeah, that is, I think we posted about that on our social media before, but yeah, I feel like highlighting those things, like
So
the way.
now you get into the difficulty of don't take anything off the property. And you're saying it makes pesto and salad. So
if it's garlic mustard, take it off the property.
You can take invasive species off the property.
Yeah.
But you have to be able to identify an invasive species carefully. That's all. I keep getting a phone number show up for the Ottawa area in the little patch. I don't understand.
Randy, it's if someone has joined in by phone on the chat, it will show up, or if they are on the Zoom call on their phones. Yeah.
Okay. Very good.
Do we know who that is? Sorry.
Do I know who it is?
No, I was asking Gabby. Did I miss who?
Let's see. I'll go
We
to-
have a 613-659 number. I'm sorry if I missed you introducing yourself. I don't know if you can hear us.
Yes, it's Carol Pratt, and that's my number. So yes, I have been listening in and taking notes.
Oh, okay, perfect. Sorry we missed you in our introduction.
Well, Carol and Cliff just showed up a little later. They just
Okay.
were busy for, the first part, but.
Cool.
All right. Yeah, does anybody else have any final questions before we close off this meeting?
I'll be going into the Altberg this weekend with Buck, and we'll be removing half a dozen branches off of a tree that fell down across the Yellow Trail.
Awesome.
So I'll be putting that into my journal, and you'll get the hours in December.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Randy.
Okay, bye.
Bye. All right. Yeah. Well, if anyone doesn't have any more questions, then it's been really great to hang out with you guys. I'm sorry we've been keeping you from the sunshine if you have sunshine where you are, but hopefully you all will be able to get out for a lunchtime walk with your dog or your family or yourself or anybody else. And again, we are so thankful to have you guys on our stewardship team, and we're very happy to have you. Again, we could not do this without you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much,
Gabby
everyone.
and Samara. Thanks very much.
No worries. All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.